Welcome to Your Epic Pursuit. I'm Mike Mooney. I'm so glad that you're with us today. This is a space for us to dive into inspiring and real conversations with leaders to explore their journeys of leadership and performance. The conversation is going to go through the EPIC lens, as we typically do in the show, EPIC being that acronym for excellence, presence, intentionality, and curiosity. And you'll be able to pull threads of that through as you hear it in the conversation today. And our goal is simply this. We just want to empower you, equip you with new ideas, new frameworks, new strategies that are going to help accelerate your pursuit in business and in life. And I have to tell you, I am very excited about the guest we have today with us, Scott MacGregor. Scott is the founder of the Outlier Project and Outlier Magazine. He's the founder and CEO of Something New, also a four-time author of the Standing O series of books, which is absolutely a fantastic read as well. And this is great. He does admit openly that he has zero sense of direction. But Scott, I got to tell you, man, you have a obviously absolutely natural knack for finding your way to the top by putting people over everything, which is so amazing. So Scott, thank you so much for being here today and for carving out time for the show, man. Thank you.
Mike, I am a longtime admirer, and I love what you're doing. And so this is an absolute pleasure and an honor. So thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Man, you were welcome, and thank you for your kind words. I'll definitely connect you with my PR group, and we will put you out there for us. But hey, why don't we start with this? Because the Outlier Project, man, that is an incredible community. I had the pleasure years back of being a founding member there with you in that, but it has since grown so much. But could you take us back just a bit to the catalyst for that vision for you, and then talk about what it's doing today for leaders and founders out there in the world?
Yeah. So, the origin story is I grew up pretty poor in a very affluent town, and I was a very curious kid. And my curiosity, I think, stemmed from just trying to figure out why we lived a very different life than everybody around us. And when you're a kid, your world probably doesn't extend much past your hometown. So I was just trying to figure out life. That curiosity, I thought, was tied to the fact that we were economically different. But I found now at 57, I'm still as curious as I ever was. That curiosity is a piece of why I started the Outlier Project. But I also knew at a very young age, Mike, that I was an outlier. I didn't call it an outlier, but I knew I sort of thought differently than my peers.
Yeah.
But when you're a young kid and you realize that you are different from your peers in terms of the way you think, I wasn't really celebrating that. I was kind of embarrassed. I was thinking there's something wrong with me. I'm weird.
At that point in life, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's a different concept of how we're showing up, right? Then versus now. Yeah.
No doubt about it. The interesting thing is, flash forward, when I got out of college and I started working, I was hitting levels of success that my peers weren't hitting. And I had to ask myself, why is this happening for me? Because I didn't have any what I thought was a distinct advantage. I wasn't more connected. I didn't have more money. All these things that you think might give you an edge. And I knew that the fact that I was always a contrarian, that I was always wanting to show up differently, that I was never afraid to take the road less traveled, that's where the pot of gold was. And so I understood then the beauty of being an outlier. Yeah. And through my curiosity, I started to curate a very unusual friend group. So Olympic athletes and pro athletes and Navy SEALs and New York Times bestsellers and billion-dollar CEOs. And the through line throughout that whole group of people that I had forged friendships with was they're all outliers. And I thought, why don't I put a community together that really celebrates these people who I have such admiration for? And that's really the genesis of the Outlier Project. And today, we're 750 members in 35 countries, growing like gangbusters, and just providing unique opportunities for people to connect with other folks, and also a very unique learning and development opportunity.
And that's what I love about it. It's community with purpose and passion, right? Of filling and serving each other up, with insight and knowledge, And I would say that in today's world, right? I mean, just think about it in today's context. A lot of uncertainty going on right now that organizations, that leaders are facing. I'm curious, like what are some of the conversations happening within this community today around how to best navigate today's, things that are happening around us? I'm curious.
Yeah, I think everyone's trying to figure out what's the future look like.
Mhm.
And there's value in that, but I think just consistently trying to do the right things, which
Yeah.
are the things you can control, the people you surround yourself with,
Yeah.
your thirst for knowledge, your desire to learn new things. Those are all things you can control. We can't control the economy. We can't control who's got the political power at the moment. There's so many things that I think people worry about, that we really try to get our community focused on what are the things that you can control,
Mhm.
and how are we a conduit to helping you do that? And that's by surrounding yourself with amazing people that have a growth mindset, that are maybe not like-minded, but like-hearted, that all have a heart for giving and a heart for helping to serve their fellow man. They may have different thoughts on different things. Otherwise, it probably wouldn't be called the Outlier Project. But so definitely like-hearted people, not necessarily like-minded.
Yeah. I was having a conversation with a CEO about a week and a half ago about this whole point of control. And I'm so glad that you brought that up, because it's such an important word right now. I think with all the uncertainty, leaders are feeling pressure to try to control situations and scenarios and outcomes that really aren't, we went through, in my opinion, Scott, there are really only four things that you can control, right? And that's your attitude, your decision, your behavior, and your energy of what you're
Yeah.
showing up with, how you as a leader choose to show up in any given moment or situation, right? We have that opportunity. But the conversation led us down this interesting path of like, well, because I'm a real big believer in the power of words. And it's like, what if we swapped out the word control for influence? Because
Hmm.
in influence, we have the opportunity to shape something, right? And bring
Yeah.
people in to collaborate to shape together and influence an outcome together, right? So I just think the fact that you have a community of people like this is just so invaluable right now. So invaluable.
It's a
So
lot of fun. We're having a lot of fun.
I know you guys are and doing some road tours as well in different cities, right? You guys were just in
Yeah.
Charlotte here recently too.
Heading to San Jose for a soccer game with Brandy Chastain on Saturday. So
It's great.
looking forward to seeing a lot of community members in California
I love
coming
it.
up.
I love it. Scott, you were named by Founder Magazine being one of the top 100 founders to follow, which clearly says that, okay, you have built organizations, you have led teams, you have the scars to show that, right? The good, the bad, and the ugly. I'd love to tap into a little bit of the experience on your journey of leadership. And there are times when leaders find themselves at these crossroads where maybe their gut, maybe their data, maybe a combination of gut and data are leading them in a certain direction. Yet there are people on their team, maybe even themselves, that are still a little like, I don't think this is the right decision to go. I don't think this is the right play. But ultimately, you take that road, right? And maybe it is that outlier road that you were talking about before. But I'm curious if you could like share a time when you made a bold decision like that, and actually the outcome transformed and changed the trajectory of maybe the team, the experience, or even maybe your leadership.
Yeah, that is a great question. This is going back to, I was a chief revenue officer, and I had helped grow a company from 5 people to about 300. And we had double-digit growth every single year for 17 straight years. And about year, I think it was 9 or 10, um, I really I got fascinated by the concept of quotas. And
Okay.
in sales, quota is everything. Like
Right.
that is how every sales organization works is, quota is the holy grail. But I saw that it contributed to a lot of negative stuff. People sandbagging deals because of quota, people maybe
Right.
sometimes not doing the right thing for the customer or for the company
Yeah.
because a quota was involved and pushing sales too much too early.
Yeah.
And I started to think about the concept of getting rid of quotas, which seemed like the craziest thing in the world. And focusing instead on what each individual sales representative's goal was.
Wow.
And because when you assign a quota, and I was running at that time a very, very large sales organization, you're assuming, and let's just say that everyone's quota is $1 million. Well, $1 million might be unbelievably motivating for Bobby and might be not motivating at all for Sally. But
Mm.
we're kind of applying this across the board number to a large number of people. And I thought, well, that's kind of silly. Why are we doing that? Because Bobby and Sally and everybody else on the team, they have different goals and aspirations. So I did a bunch of research. I actually found a study from Stanford that talked about quotas and kind of, some of the negative aspects of companies having a quota. And I made the decision, which was very, very radical, to eliminate quotas. Um, Now our sales team were thrilled,
I'm
but
sure.
managers
Right. So,
came to me and they said, are you crazy? How are we going to control,
yeah.
using that word,
Yeah.
control? How are we going to control our sales teams?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it took a lot of convincing because they felt like that was how they were able to control their salespeople. And I tried to remind them that the only thing we can control is ourselves. We can't control other people. And using your words, we can influence people.
Yeah.
And I said, what a different environment we would have if we were working, let's say, with Mike, and we understood that one of Mike's goals was to send his kid to a certain school or maybe buy a beach house or that, that was really important to him. And what if we helped Mike? We put all of our energy into helping Mike achieve his goal.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow.
and we had tremendous success. So it was very controversial to make such a radical move.
Yeah. Hey, man, don't, if it's not broken. Let's not try to fit. Scott, why are you trying? Why now? Right? I
I
mean,
heard it many times.
I'm sure.
Killing it. Why would we do this? We did it. And our most successful years we ever had were after we made that decision. So
Mm.
it was very unpopular in certain segments of the company, but we made the decision. We did it. We got everybody on board,
Mm.
and it took us from great to absolutely unstoppable.
Wow.
And so that was a leadership lesson, that I remember that I think answers the question.
Oh no, it does. It does. And man, I could stay on this for the whole show, honestly, but there are a couple of things I would like to dig into with this, if you don't mind, because the things that come to my mind, and that is that you yourself have to be a great salesperson to sell the idea upstream. It's the downstream, not a problem. Not a problem. So obviously you had a track record, you had trust with the senior leadership.
Yeah.
You clearly had some data that you found along the way, but you had a vision of how this could work. So I'm sure that those conversations that you were having, you were very intentional with how you wanted to position this, even though you didn't know what the outcome per se was going to be, right? So I'm curious about like how those conversations like Was it as simple as that? You just kind of went in and said, hey, here's the vision, here's what we're trying to do. And then the next part of that I think is probably equally as important is while the teams downstream are cheering, all right, no more quotas, I'm sure there had to have been guardrails that you had to be very, very specific with what the expectations still were for a sales organization that was performing so well. That this isn't supposed to be your off ramp to let off the gas, right? This is just a way that we can make this more personalized to your goals and aspirations to help you get there. So we
Yeah.
still need you doing certain things to meet goals. So I'm curious about how those were set up too. So maybe if we just start with, I packed a lot into that. So if we just start with maybe how what was your strategy going upstream to try to get this to get them to bite on something that was sacrilegious?
I mean, that was the great thing is there was almost no upstream. So I reported
Okay.
directly to the CEO. So the only person I really had to convince was the CEO, who was my boss. And I
Mhm.
had, he had taken a huge risk. I was at a Fortune 500 company, and a recruiter called me and said, there's this tiny little startup, 5 people, but they're creating something that really doesn't exist in the market. And I met with Leo Benetti, who was the CEO.
Mhm.
I was 29 years old and had probably no business becoming a chief revenue officer at 29, but he took a chance. And those preceding 9 years were very, very successful.
Yeah.
And we had decided, I told him right off the bat, this is 27 years ago, Mike. And I said, Leo, we're going to hire people anywhere in the country and they're going to work from their home. And he was like,
You
wait,
were
what?
savant.
Wait,
God.
people are going to work from their house?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like from their, really? And this is 27 years ago. I mean,
Unbelievable.
today it's commonplace, but
Right.
27 years ago, there was not a
You're
lot of
crazy.
virtual
You're
sales
crazy.
forces,
Yeah.
but he let me do that. And it proved to be incredibly successful.
Wow.
So I had built up a lot of political capital and
Mhm.
currency so that it was a logical argument and framework that I had put in front of him. And then I sat down with our CFO and we kind of put a model together and decided this was going to work. And it was not only going to work, but it was going to give us a competitive advantage
Yeah.
because we were hiring a ton of people, and it gave us a competitive advantage because when I was talking to a salesperson, I would say, oh, and another thing is we don't have quotas. We don't believe in quotas. We believe in helping you achieve your goals. There's nobody else saying that
Yeah.
to a potential salesperson. So
Right.
we were able to kind of get our pick of the litter, and it helped us to grow a very, very large sales force.
Wow. Okay. That's fantastic. And then now going downstream, how did you keep the parameters on to say, look, this isn't about you don't go out there and sell? I mean, was it really about having them focus on their goals? Is it just that simple, or were there
That's
some?
simple. We sat down with every single individual salesperson. They were all national account managers. We sat down with every single national account manager and we really unpacked what their goals were. And we
Mhm.
didn't take, like if somebody said, I want to make $300,000 a year, we didn't just take that at face value. We really tried to get to like, what do you really want? What are you really after? And
Wow.
for some people, for one guy, he wanted to buy a Jersey Shore house. And for other people, it was where they wanted their kids to go to school
Yeah.
or a certain number they wanted to put in their retirement account and things like that. So we captured all that stuff. And then we would individually, my regional directors of sales, who the sales reps reported to,
Yep.
that's all that they would talk to them about, things that they actually cared about, things that their spouse cared about, things that were deeply meaningful to them. It changed everything. Uh,
It's amazing.
and there were articles written about it at the time because kind of
Yeah.
word got out that
I'm
we
sure.
were doing something that was, I'm sure we weren't the first company to ever do it, but it was certainly very, very much against the grain. And as soon as we started to see the traction and the adoption from our sales force, and you know, they couldn't, every single person set goals for themselves that actually exceeded what our bare minimum was from a revenue
Isn't
standpoint.
that amazing? Isn't
So it didn't really.
right? I mean, isn't that amazing? Where when you release what you think is a mechanism of control and motivation, when you release the reins of that for people to actually be able to operate in the space where they feel the opportunity to influence their future, to do something that's going to truly benefit them, not necessarily the company, obviously the company too, but then the results are actually higher than what you would have put in the first
Yeah.
place. I mean, it is amazing how that.
I've shared this story with so I run a talent strategy company called Something New, and I've
Mhm.
shared this strategy with founders and CEOs and chief revenue officers. I've never convinced any of them to adopt it because I think it still is considered very, very radical, even though I don't see it as radical at all. I just see it as very, very logical. Help people achieve their goals. And as long as their goals are in alignment with the financial needs of the company,
Yep.
that's a much more enjoyable place to work
Uh,
than, you know, you got to hit $1 million quota that $1 million may or may not be completely meaningful to you.
yeah. No, it's a great point. And I think the toughest part of that equation, in my opinion, is that your plan of understanding each individual's motivations, goals, aspirations would require more heavy lifting by the organization than they would probably want to put in. So it's easier to go with quotas to get them going that way. Because what you're suggesting is not easy, I am sure, for your regional managers. It probably took a different way of thinking for them. I've got to be obviously mindful of numbers, but I need to really be committed to the people that are working with me, and that.
Yep. It's people over everything. It's
Yeah,
understanding that we are every individual person that we're hiring
yeah,
is extremely important. And quotas were just kind of this blanket. It's easy. So everyone's got the same quota and you know, you don't have to think that much about it.
that's right.
Now we have to think about like, wait, what does Lori want versus what does Jessica want
Yeah,
versus what does John want? What does David want? What does
right.
Peter want? You know, to get out of this experience where, you know, they're putting in 40, 50, 60 hours of work to achieve what? We want them I wanted them to be achieving things that were meaningful to them, not necessarily meaningful to the company.
Well, let me ask a clarifier on that. But meaningful to them being the employee, but the output of their actions was going to benefit the the company.
100%.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, it feeds one feeds the other on that.
Still stack ranked
Yeah,
everything, like everyone would still, you know, we would see this person brought in,
yep.
you know, 150,000, this person brought in 120,000. Like it
Hmm.
was still, there was still that because I think salespeople still like to compete and they would like to see their name at the top of the list. So it's not that we just said, okay, you do whatever the heck you want
Yeah,
and we don't care.
yeah.
We still monitored all the important numbers and stack ranked them and reported them. So they were very, very visible. But all of our communication was around the individual person's needs and wants.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. That is phenomenal. And clearly, what I love about that is you have the results to back it up. It wasn't just an experiment and said, "Yeah, oh no, people liked it." No, no, people loved it, and the numbers show, like you said, the following years you were exceeding the amazing numbers you had been driving the previous 10 years. So,
Which it was even more so because when you think of, so we grew double digits every year for 17 straight years. You know, when you're doing $1 million, that's is not a big deal to grow double digits. When you're doing 30 million
um,
and 35 million and 40, like, and
yeah.
you're still growing at that rate, that's significant. And we kept that up until I left to start my company.
Amazing, man. Amazing. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And during, and maybe during that time, or maybe another time with one of the other organizations, I'm sure there was a point where the pace, the pressure, the demands, the expectations of the team, maybe even of yourself, had you all hitting a wall where it's just like, we're done. Can't get any more out of myself, out of each other. You know, performance might be sort of like on the fence right now. People's mindsets are off. But was there a time when you faced that and you did something and maybe it was unconventional, but it actually helped to deliver the breakthrough that the team was looking for? Maybe even it was you, perhaps. I've had some people say, "Oh no, the team was fine. It was me that was hitting the wall. I had to
Yeah.
do this to, you know, take care of myself first, right?" But I'm just curious if you've had an experience that you could share, because there are a lot of people, I'm sure, in these days that are feeling like they're not just running against it, but their backs are against it, and it's like, what can I do?
It's a great question. So there's a couple things that I did, and then I'll get to kind of what I to answer your question specifically. So I I feel anxiety when I feel like I don't have any options. When I feel like I'm backed into a corner and I don't have options. If I feel like I have options, then I very rarely get stressed.
Yeah, yeah,
And if I had to think that I'm going to be, because being a chief revenue officer is a stressful job because you're in charge of sales, marketing, client success, and everyone's relying on you to bring in numbers. So, it's a stressful existence. So what I did was I decided I stole this actually from an old manager of the Los Angeles Dodgers, Walter Alston. So
okay,
Walter Alston signed 1 year contracts with the Dodgers. And he signed, I think he was their manager for maybe 20 years. So he signed 21-year contracts. And I always remember reading his autobiography when I was a kid. And I thought one of the cool things about that is you only have to commit to 1 year.
hmm
So I mentally, and I suggest this for anybody, I mentally committed to my job for 1 year. And then I would decide at the end of that year, did I want to re up and keep going, or did I want to do something different?
yeah,
And I didn't share this with anybody. It was just something I did myself, but it always made me feel like I had an option. And I always thought, well, Scott, like no matter how tough it gets, like you can do anything for a year. I can do
right,
anything
right,
for a year. I'm not
yeah,
sure I could do anything for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. And I was there for 17 years. So
wow,
I did sign those 17 contracts. I just, for me, uh, it gave me options and I felt very free. And I never sat on the fence. Like, I think we can be very ineffective as leaders when we have 1 foot in and 1 foot out. We're kind of like,
yeah,
I was 100% committed, but I was only 100% committed to that next year. So, year 17, the problem was me. I wasn't passionate about the business anymore. I had started to think of entrepreneurial things that I wanted to do. I had started to really build a company that turned into the company something new that I started. Um, and so my brain was not in it. I was sleepwalking through, you know, and I'm like, I'm not going to sign that contract. And, with the help of my wife, who was super supportive, I was making, a fairly significant amount of money and I'd had a ton of success there. But she really helped me jump off the cliff and do something that for quite a while, and maybe this is because I grew up, relatively poor, it just seemed very irresponsible to leave a company that I'd helped build
yeah,
and that I was making a
right,
lot of money. But really with her help and with the knowledge that I really, what I was the problem. They needed new leadership. After 17 years, I'm like, okay, it's time for me to move on, and I did.
Wow. Was there also an element of that, Scott? Because I understand the guilt-ish part of that, right? Where you're like, "Oof, man, you're part of the fiber of that organization, the tribal knowledge, right? All of those things." Yet I've and I experienced this, and maybe this is where I'm going with it. Maybe you as well. I know others have it, but when we're at a place for a while and we've put our heart and our soul into it, even if it's 1 year at a time, you still stacked a lot. We can make the mistake of attaching our identity to that role, to that company, like who we are, how we value ourselves, what we think we can do is attached to that organization, that role that we've put so much into. Was that something that ever crossed your mind, or was something that you had to maybe decouple in that?
I think it certainly was something I thought about. I say this all the time, and I say it to my teams all the time, probably weekly. My wife is Meg, and I say I'm married to Meg. I'm not married to anything else. And so I'm not attached to, I don't hold on to anything with dear life and say I
Hmm.
would never change that,
Yeah.
because I want to be open to new opportunities and new possibilities and new iterations. And, when you joined, a great example, when you joined that community was called the Talent Champions Council,
Yeah.
and we
Yeah.
rebranded years into it. And I realized that was not really what I wanted to build. I wanted to build the Outlier Project, and we completely changed.
Yeah.
So I'm just not married to anything other than my wife. That's it. I'm
Man,
married to Meg. I'm not married to, and it sounds silly though, but Mike, I have found in consulting and advisory work with founders and CEOs, I've had people say like they wouldn't change their logo. They're so
yeah.
attached to their logo, their company name, or
Yeah.
their buyer persona, or their company colors, or whatever.
Yeah.
They hold on to that for dear life, and I'm like, that's meaningless.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Don't get attached to that stuff.
yeah, and it's easy to, right? Because if it's successful and it's going well, then why are we going to shake this up? Yet as an individual, I know for myself, I wish I had that advice years ago, Scott, because I know when I was in a particular role at a company. This was early on. I was in my early 30s, and I valued myself and I attached myself to that role because of the commas in the paycheck, the title on the card, the sway I had when I walked into a room, And the company ended up going into a merger, and my role was eliminated. And suddenly I found myself like, whoa, all the things that I had attached value to for myself, married myself to, were gone, and quite honestly, gone by someone else's doing.
Hmm.
Right? So, like to me, the lesson was be mindful of where you attach your value and worth and identity, especially with things that are outside of your control or influence. If you're in an org chart, so I love the fact that you had that perspective of saying, look, I'm not married to it. I'm sure you took pride in what you had built and the relationships and the success and all of those things. But you probably, had you stayed, there probably would have been a different conversation, right? The CEO would have come and said, hey, Scott, what's going on, man? You're sleepwalking.
Hmm. Yeah.
You're just
So
you're cashing a check right now.
no doubt about it. Yeah, and I've been blessed in that I have a lot of friendships with people that have been Olympic athletes, pro athletes, and Navy SEALs, Green Berets, Rangers, etc. And they can get very, very attached to that identity. And I have
Sure.
seen, friends of mine who had, played in the NFL or whatever, really struggle
Hmm.
when that identity changes. And so it's always been a constant reminder to me
Yeah.
that I am not, the founder of this or the CEO of this or the
Mhm.
author of that. It's like, it's got to be rooted in something deeper and more significant than kind of that surface level stuff. But it's easy to get your identity attached to being a CEO or being an author or a publisher, or
Sure.
this or that.
Sure, because it's tangible. B, it's easier than having to do that work to dig in and say, what is that for me?
Right.
What is that for me? It's easier just to take the path and go, boom, this is what it is. This is what I do. And next, let's go. Scott, this has been absolutely fantastic, my friend. I truly appreciate all the wisdom and insight that you've shared. I mean, through an incredible journey, an incredible pursuit. I love how you shared from the beginning that you recognized from an early age that your thinking and the way you were living and all, made you an outlier, and how that curiosity really became a thread that's not only was serving you then but continues to serve you now. And I mean, I was writing notes along down here. I mean, the idea of having the courage to reshape, right, the things that might seem traditional, like the quotas, but to focus on the goals and aspirations and motivations of your team, the people that are building the business that can actually shift the environment, the culture in which those people are showing up, and more importantly, the impact you can make in your field, the value of building the relational currency and trust before you need it, right?
Mhm.
All those things is I'm a big believer, like, you build your network before you need the network, serve, 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 right? So that point of building that currency paid off dividends. The fact that you dug into the delegation of the communication to your regional managers. You weren't the one having to carry all of it, but you were working directly with your team to delegate and give them ownership in the areas that matter to them, and still tracking the metrics, to make sure that, hey, people know where they are, where they stand, what's going on, how are we shaping up, how are we performing. I think that's a powerful outline for people who are considering evolving, I won't say change, but evolving systems or practices within their own organizations that are going to be more people centered first and
Yep.
still serving the organization at the end of the day. And your year by year mindset is fantastic. Again, I wish I had leaned into that, because I lean in, I'm in here, I'm in for the long haul, right? But that year by year, it's just a great little shift of curiosity, right? Giving you those options. And finally, you're a lucky man with Meg, clearly, but being mindful of what you're married to,
Yep.
right? Not who, but you know who you are, but what you're married to in your career, in your life, is so powerful, man. Thank you so much.
This has been a blast, my friend. I often don't have these types of conversations on podcasts, so this is a lot of fun. This is a
Awesome,
lot of
man. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. Is there anything that you want to mention or promote or talk about with the Outlier Project or the magazine or books that are coming out that the audience can follow up on for you?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to subscribe to the magazine, the digital version of the magazine is free. You can go on my LinkedIn profile and you can get the free digital subscription.
Great.
If anyone's interested in the Outlier Project, you can go on the outlierproject.live. Or you can, ping me through LinkedIn and just say I'm interested in talking more about the Outlier Project, and I'm happy to book a call and talk to anybody about, what the community could bring to them. But thanks for the opportunity for those two plugs.
Of course, man. Of course. That's what we're here to serve and expand and help, with no question. So, for all of you listening in, I'd love to hear some of your thoughts in the comments below. I'm sure you took great notes, a lot of actionable ideas and frameworks here for your epic pursuit, right? That's what it's all about. And friends, until we meet again, just remember, your best is yet to come.